All right, guys, let's look at another example of how to solve some of these trig equations. And very similar to the last video I made, this problem has double angles and single angles, happens to have a cosine of a double angle. And cosine of a double angle has three identities that go with it. My suggestion, use the identity that has all cosines in it, because the rest of the problem only has cosines. So you'll use the one that says 2 cosine squared theta minus 1. And that's what I'm going to plug in for my cosine of a double angle identity. Right, very important. If you have single angles and double angles, you got to pick one and kind of use substitution to get everything in terms of a single angle. So in place of this purple, I'm gonna write 2 cosine squared theta minus 1, and notice it's in parentheses because that 2 out front is going to distribute. And then I guess I can bring the rest of this business down. Plus 2 equals. Well, I've got to give myself a little bit of room here. We'll cheat with the Apple Pencil. Equals 3 cosine theta. Now I got to distribute, right? Distribute that 2, so that's 4 cosine squared theta minus 2. Again, I can start collecting some like terms, right? I can bring this 2 over. I'm sorry, I can bring the 3 cosine over. Of course, it'll become negative on the left, and 2 take away 3 is negative 1 cosine theta. I still have a plus 2 equals 0. And then quickly you notice that the 2 and the negative 2 cancel. That kind of makes my life a little bit easier. So I got 4 cosine squared theta minus a cosine theta equals 0 right after those 2's. Now, you got to say, hey, is there something I can do? You got to draw on your algebra knowledge. Because what do you have here? You have something that really, it kind of looks like 4x squared minus x equals 0. What would you do with that x? You would factor it out, and you'd get that, is what you do. Same thing here. You have a cosine in both terms. It's a greatest common factor. Factor it out front. Bring it out front. So when in doubt, take your trig and say, hey, what does it look like? What would you do in algebra class? Well, you'd factor out the greatest common factor. Same thing here. Of course, factoring is dividing. So 4 cosine squared divided by cosine would just be 4 cosine theta. Cosine divided by cosine is 1. You don't leave a blank there, right? You need something. It's 1. And then here again, I'm at the same spot I've been for a couple of problems in a row. I have 2 terms that multiply to 0. You could set each of these guys to 0. Okay, and then this, cosine equals 0. That's pretty easy. That's a quadrantal angle, right? All these zeros and ones for sines and cosines are between the quadrants. In particular, cosine is 0 up at 90 degrees and down the bottom of the unit circle at 270. Here, I got to do a little algebra first, right? I got to move that 1 to the other side and divide by 4. Here I got cosine equals a quarter. That's not a memorized angle, so I have no option. I have to solve for theta by taking the inverse cosine of a fourth. So go to either some online calculator or you can use your TI-84. If I type in cosine inverse of a fourth, it's going to give me something between 0 and 90. In particular, it gives me 75.5. Right? I'm rounding that off. I think it said nearest tenth. It does. So that's 75.5. Don't forget, we almost always have 2 answers to these angles that are non-quadrantal. In other words, within the quadrants. It gave me 75 because that's in quadrant 1. I have a little room down below here, right? Let's draw our unit circle. So 75 is about here, right? 75.5. And don't forget, I have my little acronym, right? Always study trig carefully. They're all positive in the first. Cosine is positive in the fourth. So my other value is going to be down here in the fourth quadrant, and it's got to be the same reference angle, 75.5, right? So this angle here is 75.5, but it's not quite all the way to 360. So your fourth quadrant angle would be 360 minus 75.5, which I should be able to do in my head, but it's been a long day. You know what I mean, guys? Yeah. I get 284. Again, you got to round it properly. 284.5. 284.5, which makes sense. That's more than 270 and less than 360. So there we go. 284.5. Again, here's one where you had 4 answers again. Again, not going to happen every time, but it just so happened if I take these other answers. So that equation I started with has 4 solutions, right? Got to take them step by step, use algebra when appropriate, use trig identities when it's appropriate. And the other thing is don't get frustrated. Sometimes you'll try some things that won't work out. There's no shame in kind of ripping up your paper, starting all over, all right? Hey, good luck, guys. Reach out to me via email if you're stuck on any of these.